Oh, all right. Today we're going to be doing one of my absolute favourite things, and that is playing around with a music format that I've never encountered before. I haven't played it yet, so we're going to be listening to it together for the first time. That is, unless you've encountered one of these in the past, which is extremely unlikely. Possible, but unlikely, because this is one of those background music formats, except it's not really background music. This is the AEI Foreground music system, and the machine I've got dates from around about the 1980s, and I've seen online when I've been trying to do research on this that some people have the machine, but not very few people seem to have the machine and the cartridges. Fortunately, I've managed to get both, and it all looks in very good condition. Now, the cartridges that this uses are these. Now, one of these, I think, should perhaps hold about 4 hours of music. I'm not entirely sure. We're going to be looking into that. We're going to look at as much as we can about this as far as the way that it works, because it's very poorly documented. There's almost nothing out there about this at all. So I'll be doing the documenting today as we go along. We'll find out exactly how it works, what speed the tape runs at, how long you can get on a tape, what it sounds like, various other little bits and pieces as we go along. But first off, I can tell you that it does use a Fidelipack Type C cartridge shell for the format. Now, Fidelipacks, you might be more familiar with the size like this. If you're familiar with them at all, this is Type A. This is the one that a DJ would play on the radio, perhaps have one single on it or jingles, that kind of thing. They were always available in A, B and C from the word go, but B and C kind of disappeared mostly. A took over and was used well into the 90s, even into the 2000s as a way to play things on the radio. But these ones, these died off pretty quick, except in this format here. It seems like this one ran all the way into the 80s, and I've got some cartridges from the 90s, so we'll have a look, see what the most recent cartridge we've got as well is. But basically they were using the Type C Fidelipack shell, but the way the tape is arranged on here is different to any Fidelipack that came out as a DJ type system. But we're going to go into all that in a minute, so let's have a good look at what I've got here, and we'll try and figure out as much about this as we can as we go along. Okay, well, we'll start off by looking at the player. As you can see, it's a Model 700 from AEI. That's where Foreground Music is mentioned. I'll just also mention that I've got it propped up on a roll of tape at the moment. That's because it only came with a couple of feet. So I've took those off. I'm going to be sticking some new ones on later on. But in the meantime, this enables me to spin it around. If we do just that, you'll see on the sides here, lovely thick piece of wood on either side. That's not a vinyl coating, that's a proper chunk of wood, and it just looks really pleasant. In fact, the whole thing looks almost brand new. I think it's a beautiful piece of industrial design. Remember, this is something that's supposed to be hidden away under a counter or in a cupboard. It's not on display, and yet they've gone to the trouble of making it look nice, which I just think is very pleasing. But if we just look at the front here, we've got a power switch. We've got a volume control that says music underneath it, and then a mic socket which is currently plugged up, but I think there's a 6.35mm mic in there. The peak, or mic socket I should say, the peak light in the middle here, that'll be for the mic. Of course, it's not going to show peak for the music. That should have been recorded at the right level to start with. Bit of instruction here, right edge of cartridge. Now, one thing about this is it's got to be very simple to use. If you were designing a background music system, there's three things that you want to concentrate on. One, it's reliable. Two, it's extremely easy to use. And three, it's even more reliable than it was under number one. Yeah, it's just got to work continuously. But with this, they made it look nice and they made it easy to use for anyone. All you do is stick your cartridge in and turn it on. There's no other buttons on here other than track, which gives away a little bit about how this one gets so much audio on one of these cartridges. Because a cartridge like this, I had one on another device that was using a similar type of cartridge, and I think you got 90 minutes out of it, which wasn't very much for a cartridge like this. I think this one gets around 4 hours or so. And the way it'll do that is to split the recording up into 4 tracks. As you can see by the fact we've got track 1, track 2, track 3 and track 4. So those are 4 programs, much the same as on an 8-track cartridge. And much the same as that, we've got a button here to move between the 4 programs, and there'll be a light, or an indicator I should say, in there to tell us what we're on. Now we'll just show on the top here, clean weekly. That's not an instruction for me, that's an instruction for the machine. And we'll go around to the back. You'll see on here the power leader's got caught, but there we go. Nice big heatsink again with that reliability in mind. And this has come from the US, so we're looking at 120 volts, 60 hertz. So I'm going to use this on a power bank with a 60 hertz output and 120 volts, or 110 volts in fact. And if we look on here, of course it's got the built-in amplifier like these devices tend to do. So you can send this off to speakers at the bottom here. However, I'm going to be using that socket there, music out. That's going to send the audio out in mono, because notice there's only the one socket. Of course, it's a background, well, I should say foreground music system. So nobody's going to be standing between two speakers listening out for stereo. So it's going to be mono. So we've got 4 tracks of mono, that gives that away. And we've got a couple of other sockets on there, a bit of information about the fact that it's using dynamic noise reduction from a National Semiconductor. That's just to reduce the hiss on the tape. And rather than using Dolby encoding, any tape that's got that on, I'll just take a little bit of the hiss off. Okay, so behind this cover, we get access to the head, which is in the middle there. I'll do a close-up on that in a second. A red button here, which according to the instructions will activate the device so you can clean the pinch roller, and there's a little bit of information there about how to go about that. So let's take a closer look in here. Now it's a little bit awkward to get the angle on this and the lighting as well, but if you just have a look in the centre here, that's the head, and if you look at the front of there, I think you can make out there are 4 individual heads on that head block, so those are 1 head for each track. And on this side, we've got a sensor, much the same as you get inside an 8-track cartridge, with 2 little bits here that when breached with a bit of foil will activate the system to jump down to the next head. Now, unlike an 8-track which actually moves the head physically up and down, or the vast majority of them do, this is just activating the next one down electronically. Now this button here will bring up the pinch roller up to the capstan, which is here. And I think we need to plug it in to have a look at that in action. Okay, so I've got it plugged in. When we switch it on, this capstan here is going to start spinning. So I'll just flip the switch now. You can see that in action. And inside here at the bottom, that's your pinch roller, which is going to be brought up against the capstan to pull the tape through. We haven't got the tape in there, of course, but if we just press this button, that's what happens. So you can see that's activated by a solenoid. And similarly, you might be able to make out this little orange switch here, which does the same thing. I'm trying to access it, but when you put your tape in, that gets pushed, and it does the same thing. Okay, so here comes the cartridge, and notice it passes under this metal bar on which is a rubber wheel, which is just there to push the cartridge down, keep it held in place. And as we bring it forward, you'll hear a click. And that is now the pinch roller brought up inside here, pushing against the capstan, which is here, and now the tape is getting pulled through the cartridge. So it's going from the centre of the reel, off to this side, across the sensor, across the head, and back onto the outside of the cartridge. Now if we just have a look at the front of the machine, and you can see from the digital display on the right that we're currently listening to track 1 of 4. Now the cartridge will automatically advance through all 4 programs and return back to the beginning and just continuously play. But if we wanted to jump to the next track, we could do it manually by pressing the button here. And of course it will go through them sequentially and then return back to the beginning again. And of course you'll notice there was no clunk when that happened because it's all being done electronically. Now I just want to do a bit of a correction to what I said before. I thought there was a mic socket behind here, but I've just taken this cover off, and it isn't a socket. In fact, it is a control for the microphone volume, much like the one to its right for the speaker volume. And of course they've plugged that up so that someone doesn't mess around with the mic volume. I should also mention, of course, the microphone isn't for recording onto this, it's for doing public address over the system. Of course, this would be connected up to a number of different speakers around the location, and if you wanted to do an announcement over those speakers, you'd use the microphone socket on the back, make sure the volume was correct, and tell everyone that there was a missing child or you'd found somebody's coat or whatever. Anyway, let's turn the power off and you'll just hear a bit of a clunk. There we go. Now, you don't have to be that delicate with it. It's really pretty much foolproof, because if you had it powered on like I did before and you put the cartridge in while it was on, it just starts playing it. And then if you gently pull it, it detaches from the front, it releases that switch, the pinch roller goes back inside, and you can swap your cartridge out. So it's absolutely foolproof. There's nothing to get wrong on this at all, which is exactly what you want. But I think it's a really clever and neat design. The Fidelipack has quite an interesting history. Its inventor, George Eash, started work on the format in 1953, and a demo system existed in 1955, and it became a commercial product shortly thereafter. An article here from 1959 shows that it was available as a music format for the home at that point, but it found more success as the basis for the 4-track cart, which I covered in a dedicated video. But then it lived on in an ever so slightly modified form as the 8-track cart, which ran through to the 80s, and all the meanwhile DJs were using the Fidelipack for playing back jingles, stings and music into the 1990s, and then some smaller stations continued using them on into the early part of the 21st century. However, the 4-track, 8-track and DJ cart were all the Type A Fidelipack cart, which was originally called the 300. Now, the largest 1200 is the same size as the one that I've got for this Foreground music machine, but those numbers at the time referred to the length of tape that was loaded into the original carts. Of course, over time, custom wound tape lengths and different thicknesses of tape made those numbers irrelevant, and hence the adoption over time of the designations A, B and C to the 3 different cart sizes. Okay, now here's a bit of a quiz question for you, something that you can play along with. When do you think the AEI Model 700 was on the market? The design of this is almost timeless. However, there are a few features that we've looked at which tend to pin it down within a certain date range. I'll tell you what those are, but if you look at the cartridges, those really cloud the issue, because the Fidelipack Type C carts, well, these things tended to die out mostly in the 1960s. I didn't see wide-scale adoption after then. So we've got to look at the machine to try and figure it out. Now, looking at this, there are a couple of things. First off, the digital display here on the right, which I've turned off at the moment. But that digital display, well, you wouldn't tend to see that on something from the 70s. It would be very unlikely. It'd have to be right at the end of the 70s. So, I mean, it's putting it down to, I'd say, the 1980s. Another thing is that logo, that's a very 80s looking logo with the little lines across it. But I think the thing that mostly gives it away is this DNR, dynamic noise reduction. Yeah, that is a chip, an integrated circuit that the DNR system was introduced sometime in the early 80s. So we're looking at early 80s onwards. However, it could be newer than I think, because look, the cartridge here, that's from August 94. The dates for each cartridge are on the bottom, and my cartridges are, I think, mostly 1990s. Yeah, they go 92, 93. So yeah, the 94 I think is the most recent one. So in a way you could say this machine might be from the 90s. It might be one of those things that just kept getting manufactured looking like this for a number of years. But there are other things we can look at. If we just turn off the power and flip it over. Okay, now this really helps us out with the date, because we've got some service information on here. Don't know how good the servicing was though. We're in the US, and you'll notice here on the 7th of Jan 85, they checked and aligned heads. I think that's supposed to say. They could do with taking some spelling lessons. But anyway, maybe they were in a hurry, because they obviously didn't do it very well, because just a week or so later, they realigned heads. Oh, goodness. So, yeah, not the best service job there, but at least you can get a date off it, 1985. So we know that this thing was around then. That's the last thing on here. Maybe that's when somebody replaced it with something else after getting fed up with these non-aligned heads. And also underneath here, one of the reasons I was propping this up with tape before is because I didn't want to rest on these, which are 2 additional controls for the bass and treble. I suppose it'd be rude not to take the lid off, so let's have a quick look inside here, see if there's anything to be learned from the internals. There's just the 2 screws at the top, so I get the feeling I'm going to have to remove the wood sides. Yeah, those have to come off as well, so let's just take those off now. And that is a nice piece of wood, varnished on both sides. Right, that should be it. Yeah, there we go. Now inside the lid here there is another service sticker, but there's no information on there, so it looks like they just used that one on the back, which would make sense. Yeah, pretty much exactly what you'd expect to find in here. I don't know what I was looking for, but there's nothing unusual here. We've just got the amplifier, the transformer, the large motor with its fan on the top, which is super smooth, of course. It's just going to keep going forever, that thing. There's a circuit board on either side. This one on the left here has 3 chips on it. I'll try and get some better pictures of those because I know people like to look for the date codes on them. And then the board on this side goes a little bit further underneath the cartridge port. And the final chip on that is the DNR chip. That's the one at the front there. Now you might have noticed that this cartridge slot here is actually quite a bit wider than a cartridge. They've got a bit of a spring over on this side, so when you pop your cartridge in, it pushes it over to its correct position and just leaves this bit of space at the side here. Anyway, I've seen everything I wanted to see, so let's pop the cover back on. Now, whilst the machine itself might appear to date from the mid-80s, the cartridges I acquired with it are more recent. We're going from August 1990 at the bottom here, all the way through to the most recent one being August 1994. I'd imagine that is towards the very end of the period in which AEI were supporting this particular format. At that point, you'd probably have to swap over to a more recent system, for example, the AEI Pro Pack, which is something that I've featured previously on this channel. Now you'll have noticed out of the 7 cartridges here, 5 of them contain classical music. Not my first choice, but you can't be picky when it comes to these things. They shouldn't really have made their way out into the wild. These things should probably be returned back to AEI or a representative for them and swapped out for another cartridge, and at the end of the lease agreement all returned and destroyed. So for any of them to survive is very good. But yeah, classical, not my first choice, don't mind it, but I'd more likely go for one of these things, contemporary instrumentals or contemporary jazz. I'll be playing either of these 2 first. I will say though, I'll see what I can get away with on the video. I mean, these ones I think are proper artists, known recordings. These classical ones, I suspect much the same. Even though the composition might have been done hundreds of years ago, it's the performance that will still have some kind of rights attached to it. Just to give you an idea as to what's on these top 2, here's the jazz one. You can pause if you really want to, but you can get an idea as to the artists on here. There are some names you can pick out, like Candy Dulfer, George Benson, Bob James. Next one, contemporary instrumentals. One thing you'll have noticed about all these, they've had the cases open. Somebody's cut into the label and opened the case, so no doubt there's been a bit of an issue with these tapes. I'd imagine they've been inside to replace the sponges. I don't know why else you'd replace it other than perhaps the tape had split inside as well, because you could replace those sponges from the top there if you really wanted to. Anyway, that gives you an idea as to what's on those. And if we just pick a classical one, for example, you'll see it's some of your old favourites there. If you look a little bit more closely on the classical, you can see copyright Polydor, copyright CBS, copyright Polygram, copyright Philips. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to play much of these at all. But perhaps if we just jump between them with the track selector, we'll be able to have a good listen. Now, I'm sure that pretty much everyone watching this is already familiar with the term background music, but foreground music, that's a designation that doesn't get used as often. And the differentiation between the 2, well, I managed to find a white paper from JBL that goes into this. It also mentions about the fact that there were studies done in the past about background music and how it could increase productivity. Those ones are very suspect because they were all pretty much funded by the people trying to sell you background music. But JBL, I think, is in the kind of business, so they call it business music, and they offer it in 2 different varieties, or at least they refer to it in 2 different varieties. Maybe they just set your speakers up, but I'll tell you what they are anyway. Background music, according to them, is business music, which is their term, played at low levels, also known as ambient or environmental music, most often found in offices, medical facilities, hotels, retail spaces. Background music is often noticed only by its absence, like when awkward silence fills a hotel lobby, superstore aisle, or employee break room. Background music is instrumental music, no vocals, and is generally recorded specifically for business music applications. Okay, so that's background music. Here is the definition of foreground music as per JBL. It's business music that's played at audio levels higher than background music, but lower than dance club or concert music. It's most often found in restaurants, theme parks, health clubs, and fashion retail spaces. Foreground music is designed to be noticed and enjoyed as entertainment. Both vocals and instrumentals are programmed, and the music may include popular hits by original artists, as well as specially recorded, theme-oriented selections. Okay, so for playback, I'm just connecting up the single music out RCA socket up to an amplified speaker, and for that I'm just going to use this because it's sitting around and it's useful to do things like this with. So we just can plug the auxiliary into that, turn it into the auxiliary port, and then finally, of course, we need to plug the power in. I'm using this jackery over here, which provides me with the correct hertz output. So we're all ready to go now, I think. I think that's on. So let's just put the cartridge in. Oh, hold on. Well, turn it on would be good, wouldn't it? There we go. Right. Right, that sounds all right. Hold on. I've just realised I've got to keep jumping to avoid the old content. Okay, well, it sounds all right. Now, I'm just wondering what speed it's running at. I feel that it's 3.75 inches per second. Just looking at how fast that capstan was spinning earlier on, it's probably not 7.5 IPS, although, given the fact it's a foreground music system, it's got to provide a decent sound quality. They can't run it really slow, like 1.78, the same as the speed of a compact cassette. I'd imagine 3.75 inches per second, but let's see if we can figure that out. The way we're going to do that is take this cartridge out and pop in one of these DJ carts, because this is recorded at 7.5 inches per second. This one contains Dre Day, so if we pop that in there, we'll see if we can hear it. Now, it's going to be a bit of a struggle to get it out because it doesn't quite fit properly, but let's just turn up the volume and see if we can hear anything. Of course, the tracks aren't going to line up perfectly. Right, obviously it's running slow. So that's definitely not 7.5 inches per second. So what I'm going to do there is get my PCM recorder and record that, put it into Audacity, and then see how much I have to turn up the speed to get it to play at the right speed. So I'll just do that right now. Now, rather than record through the microphones, I've connected the cart machine via its line out straight into this PCM recorder, and you can see we've got a recording coming in on the right hand channel there. I'll only record for a couple of minutes here. I just need a bit of a sample so I can put it into Audacity and see exactly what speed it's running at. It was sounding really very slow though, so it might actually be slower than 3.75 inches per second. We'll find out, but it looks like the track might just be fading out here. If I'd have known I was starting from the beginning, I'd have been able to work out the speed from that, because this particular track is 4 minutes 48 in length. However, I don't know if I was at the beginning of the cart, so I think that should be enough. We'll put that into Audacity and see exactly what it was recorded at. Right, so I've amplified it and I've doubled the speed. Let's have a listen. Okay, still muffled, however, that is the right speed. Unfortunately, I've just caught the end of the song, so I've not got any rapping on here. But I can tell that's the correct speed. So there we are, that's the answer. The carts are running at 3.75 inches per second, because one of these things runs at 7.5, and that needed speeding up twice to get it to the right speed. There we go, easy. Okay, so we know what speed the tape runs at, but the next question is, how long does the cart play for? Well, I suppose it depends on the cart. Some of these could have more music on than others. The classical ones, I'm not too sure how long each of those tracks is going to be. And then if we look at the contemporary ones, well, these are instrumentals. Again, I'm not particularly familiar with the tracks. It looks like there's more tracks on here than there is on there, though. Now, I could go online and look up each of these tracks and work out the playtime for each one and then multiply that by 4. Or we could just play one of these carts and wait for the track change to take place, and then we can time it from there. I think that's probably the most fun, because at least then I can sit back and have a listen to some music. So let's go with that. I'm also going to be interested to see if the auto change is working as it should. So let's just pop that in there. Oh, that tape isn't working as it should. Let's try it again. Oh, nasty. That is not what you want to see, is it? Yeah, unfortunately, I can't get the tape back in the cartridge. I think there's just too much come out, and I'm going to have to open that one up. So at least we've got an excuse to open one of these up later, but it would happen to be one of my favourites. So instead, let's just pop onto another cartridge. We'll go on to a classical, because if this one goes wrong, I'm not going to be as upset. So let's just pop that in there. Right, there we go. We're fine now. Right, so let's just play that one and see if we can get from track 1 to track 2 automatically. While I'm waiting for that track number to flip over to 2, I might as well open this cartridge and see if I can rescue it. Let's have a look. Oh dear. What the heck? What? Oh, it's got all stuck. That's the problem. Look. There's this. Oh, no, it's ruined. Look. It's glued to that. Oh my goodness. Oh, what a shame. Oh. Yeah, now unfortunately this is a lot worse than it first appears. It looks like you could just pop it back on here, but it's tightened itself up in the middle, so much so that I can't get this tape back in position. The outer section is nice and loose, and that is rock solid. Yeah, I think what I'm going to have to do is take all this off here, thread it onto another reel. Obviously I'm going to have to splice it at some point, and then perhaps try and put it all back in again. Yeah, let's just leave this for today. I'm not in the mood at all. It's rather sad, that, isn't it? Okay, and things were going so well. A little bit of sponge there as well. Yeah, I'm afraid these cartridges are definitely showing their age. This one is still playing, and it's currently playing one of my favourite pieces of classical music. But we still haven't got to track 2, so I'll just stay here a while and have a listen. Well, the good news is the feet have arrived, so I'll just stick these to the bottom. At least that's one thing that's working out. Perfect. You know, looking at this, I'm not entirely convinced that that is an original part. I'm wondering if someone's just stuck that on there. The fact that it's foam and not falling apart makes me think that it wasn't supposed to be in here, and maybe that is why it's all got stuck. I'd imagine if there was something there originally, which is of course designed to hold this tape down, it would have been that kind of foam stuff that just disintegrates, and then someone's gone and stuck some of this stuff on thinking they're doing a good job, and as it is, they've ended up destroying the tape as a result. So to be able to figure that out, I do fortunately have one tape that no one's messed around with somewhere in here. They've all got the screw holes visible apart from this one, which means no one's been in here because of course the screws are behind this cover. So let's open this one up and see what should be in there, because I'll need to have a look inside all of these, because if whoever had these previously put that same bit of sponge in all of them, they're all going to jam up on me. Now, I'm used to dealing with the fact that all 8-track cartridges need a repair because the sponge in those disintegrates, but of course I haven't dealt with this kind of cartridge before, but I certainly don't want to risk destroying any more of them. Okay, so that's the final screw taken out, so hopefully we can lift this off now and see what kind of pad is holding the tape down, and I'm hoping it's a different sort. Yeah, clearly that's different. I mean, it's a different colour for one thing, not at all sticky. So yeah, that's what should be in there. It's a foam pad, just like the one that they put in there, which, I mean, I can understand why they put it in there because it looked much the same. It's the same thickness. So that's what it should look like inside. So the tape is coming off the centre of the reel, going around the outside here. This is spring loaded, I think. Oh yeah, that's just this part here, and then it goes back on there. So what's happening here is once the pinch roller comes up into here, it releases this part, which enables it to spin around. Right, so now I know that that's what the stuff should look like, and it should just be on there to hold it down. I'm going to open the rest of them up later and make sure they're all in good condition, and if that's starting to get a bit sticky in any of them, I'm just going to replace all of them. And actually you can tell looking at this one, see those marks there? I mean, those wouldn't have been there from manufacture, so someone has scraped off the previous pad with a screwdriver, popped this one in instead, which does look much the same, but unfortunately seems to have a negative reaction when it comes into contact with the tape, which is exactly the opposite of what you need. Anyway, now we know. I'll put the screws back in this one and I'll get back to the job of figuring out when the tape jumps to the next track, because so far it hasn't happened. I've turned it off for the moment because well, it's a different day. Behind the scenes info that you don't need to know. So let's get on with that job. I've just realised I'm sitting here like a fool waiting for this to jump because I decided to look at the cartridge, and it turns out that the one I mentioned was my favourite classical piece, or one of them, is there. So it should have jumped about here, and I'm probably listening to this all the way through again. Okay, Symphony number 82 in C. Whereabouts is that on here? Well, I think we're on this one at the moment, so I'll just wait for that to come round again, and I'm going to start the timer. And let me just stick a screwdriver in the top, which is always recommended, and just bridge the connector and see if it jumps. Hold on. There we go. So maybe it's just a bit dirty on the front. So we'll just get it back round to program 1 again. But I think now we're just hitting the point at the end of this track. I'm going to press start on my stopwatch, or stop on my stopwatch, hold on, that's the button. And I think we're round in a loop. Yes. There we go. Right, so I'm going to start from there, and I'm going to go off and do a few other things, and then come back in about 50 minutes, I think it's going to be at least that, and see exactly how long this particular cartridge is. I think that's it. We should be looping back round again in a second. A little bit shorter than I thought. There we go. Right, so we'll stop there, and that means that approximately this tape is 200 minutes long, 3 hours 20. So not the 4 hours I was expecting. However, that's just this particular cartridge. I'd imagine they could get up to 4 hours or thereabouts. Got a bit of contact cleaner on the end of here, but I've got a feeling that cleaning this sensor is doing absolutely nothing, because it looked very clean to start with, and well, there's a little bit of muck on there. I don't think that's enough to stop it jumping the tracks down. We know that if we breach these two sides with a screwdriver, it does advance the tracks to the next one. So this is working. I think the problem might lie inside the cartridge, because we know someone's been inside these cartridges already due to the exposed screws. So the question is, why did they open them up? You wouldn't do it unless you had to. I've got a feeling that the tape split at the splice, which is a metal piece of tape holding the two ends together, exactly the same kind of thing that falls off on pretty much every 8-track eventually. And maybe they just spliced it back together with a bit of tape and didn't put the foil on it. That might be the reason this isn't advancing to the next program. I'm going to see if it advances now I've cleaned that sensor. This is quite a time-consuming experiment. Right, there we go. That's the end of the side. So hopefully this is going to advance now. Any second now. Fingers crossed. Right, I can hear the audio cutting out in the background. Oh, we're back in again. Yeah. So let's just have a look in there. Yeah, it's already gone past too quickly. It's gone across here. And I can't see it on the outside of the reel. So I've got to think the splice is already one layer down at least. And of course I can't rewind this, so the only option is run it for another 50 minutes and then just listen for that track to finish, and then I'm going to work my way past it until we get to it. Okay. What is that, by the way? What's that? That shouldn't be there. Another 50 minutes and we can test this one again. While I'm waiting for this to loop around again, I thought it's a good time to do a bit of an experiment, because whilst the device is 60 Hertz, I'm just wondering if it really is just 60 Hertz or if it's 50/60. I think it's going to be 60. I think it's an AC motor, but we'll find out. So let's just have a listen for a second and then I'll swap it over to just a regular step-down transformer. Right, so we've killed that. We'll take the power out of here and we'll stick it in just a normal step-down transformer, which won't adjust the output from the UK 50 Hertz. So this will run slow now if it can't cope with 50 Hertz. Let's just have a listen. There we go. So this machine definitely needs 60 Hertz. So I'll pop it back on that. There you go, learnt something else. I mean, maybe there's a European version available, but of course they're not very common, so you just got to deal with what you've got. So there we go. That's it. Right, so that's the end of the track. So now I'm going to manually advance this and see if we can find the splice. Here it comes. Yeah, so there is a bit of foil on there, however, it's quite worn. So I think we just need to replace that. I might have a piece of that in the house. Let me just have a look. I found the foil strips, but I'm not going to put one on because I've had another thought. Whilst the foil is there, I think the issue is it's just not getting pushed against the head. Because look, there's no sponge on here. There's a little bit on there, so obviously it's playing. But the one that's supposed to push it against the sensor, that one's missing. So that's what's going on. It's just bypassing it completely. I'll see if I can get that out. There we go. And put a new sponge on there to push it outwards. I'm hoping this will be thick enough. This is for an 8-track cartridge when you've got the metal leaves pushing against the tape. This goes on one of those. But I think it'll do the same job. I mean, it looks roughly the same size. So we'll just pop it on there. And I think if we can get it in place, that's going to do the job. Right, now whilst you can't rewind these cartridges, I think we can just move it back a little bit so that we can get that foil just before the sensor there. Right, okay, we'll give that a go. Oh, apologies for the audio being a bit weird there. I just realised I hadn't clicked my mic on. I've got it on now. Better late than never. Okay, so here we go. We'll pop the cartridge in first. And now switch it on, and hopefully this will change tracks very quickly. Or not at all. Right, well maybe it's a combination of things. I'm going to open it up again, pull the tape back a little bit and put a foil splice on. Right, well if that doesn't work, nothing will. So in another 50 minutes we're going to find out. Right, you join me 50 odd minutes later and we wait to see if it actually skips tracks now. And it's working. That's a big relief. So there you go, that's everything that I could learn from playing around with this format. I can't tell you what the format's called. I mean, these are Type C Fidelipack carts. The player is a Model 700 from AEI. However, I have seen other players out there. It's a foreground music system, but AEI also brought out the later ProPack foreground music system. This one didn't seem to have a nice snappy name. Maybe it did at the time and everyone's forgotten it. But yeah, rather than it just being a regular Fidelipack Type C cart, it's loaded with 4-track tape with a foil splice and played at 3.75 inches per second, and it sounds really good as well. I mean, we've got that DNR on there, the noise reduction, just in case there was any hiss, although tape that's played at 3.75 inches per second on a reel-to-reel machine, that's same 1/4 inch wide tape, sounds just fine to me, and it sounds pretty much the same as that, other than the fact that we're dealing with 4 individual tracks rather than 2 stereo pairs that you get on your reel-to-reel machine. But of course it's running at the same speed. The track width is the same as one of the channels, so it sounds the same as that to me. So yeah, it sounds perfectly fine. It's got some good heavy components in here to keep away the wow and flutter as well. So yeah, nice little thing this. And I've got to say, if I'd have got hold of this, say 20 years ago, and my mother had still been alive at the time, I would have given this to her because she loved listening to classical music and she listened to the same old cassettes over and over again, and she would have been quite happy to put a cartridge in like this and listen to 4 hours of classical music recorded by proper like orchestras, not just some backing group, you know, like a proper decent recording that'll all send up on CD and tape. Which is of course why I can't play an awful lot of this, because it's all still copyrighted stuff. But it sounds fine to me. It would have sounded just fine to her, but she would have just liked the convenience of being able to stick one of these in a machine and press play. She wasn't a very techie person, but I mean, anyone could operate something like this. I suppose the only issue I'd have would be the fact we need to deal with a step-down transformer, etc. But, you know, it's not going to happen now. Anyway, I've also got to say, nowadays, it's a little bit unreliable. It wouldn't have been back when it was out, back in the 80s and 90s. This would have played day in, day out for days on end with no problem at all. However, due to age, things are getting a bit glued up and stuck and things, so you really got to be careful with these. I'm going to open them all up before playing them. We've learnt a little bit more about the specs and things now, and also the fact I've got cartridges here that go up to August 94. I mean, that's great to see a Fidelipack Type C cart still in use in the 90s, in the mid-90s almost. I mean, there might have been ones that went a little bit further than that. I have ordered myself some earlier carts. I managed to find a seller online who dealt with 8-track, who managed to get hold of a few of these, and I bet they'd had them for sale for years. I spotted them on there and I've ordered them. They're on their way to me at the moment, and the thing that appealed about those, it's popular hits from the early 80s, chart hits, recognisable songs. But yeah, you're listening to that same 4 hours of music in the same order every time, unless of course you skip to the next programme along by pressing the button on the front. So that is the main disadvantage of foreground or background music tape-based systems. It's the same music in the same order every time, and if you were working in a shop or somewhere where this was playing, you get to know the next track along. Now, with 4 hours, it's a little bit better, but still you start to learn which track follows which track, and it starts to get rather irritating, which is of course why they swapped the cartridges out at regular intervals. But that is where digital really helped out with this kind of system. in that you could stick a lot of CDs in something, just have it on random play, and later you could put MP3s on something or just a hard drive or whatever, and it would just play music randomly. Then of course there were those ones where they were broadcast over the internet and some of them over the radio and things. So yeah, the tape-based systems are limited by the fact it's sequential, and that can get rather annoying rather quickly. However, I like things like this, and I like playing around with this today, and I hope you've enjoyed having a look at it with me. And it's nice to see another format that I haven't played around with before, and one that sounds so good, and the machine looks so nice as well. And I think I'm going to add this into my hi-fi. I've got a feeling that this is going to just slot in there and just be another weird format in the hi-fi, because it sounds fine. If I can get all the cartridges working well and I get me popular hits ones, I think that'll be a nice thing to add in there. But anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.